To our Sleepless Nights pODDcast listeners on Spotify. Now we have a subscription service for $7.99 a month U.S. funds.
Oh, wow.
What does that subscription get you?
Huh?
Glad you asked. It gives you the weekly notification of the standard show when it's released, but also access to our members only Segment 5 that drops a few days after.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
Yes, for pennies a day, support your favorite weekly show financially to help us with the necessities like eggs, bread, horse and milking, or in Paul's case, that endless supply of Grandpa Nana's corn chips. Another tasty thing you can do to help with your favorite show, now that you've listened to us on Spotify, on the app, you can rate this podcast. That's right, give us a glowing review to help new people find this show and make it their favorite show, who will rate the show and help new people find this show to make it their favorite show, who will make it, well, you get the idea. It's the circle of Spotify life, right, Paul?
What's this now?
This podcast is proudly supported by our patrons at patreon.com. You can join us at patreon.com/Sleepless Nights Podcast. All systems go.
Attention Sleepless Nights. Thank you for consuming this OSI 74 product broadcast, live from the Black Knight satellite. For optimum performance and safety, your host, Mr. Lobo, asks that you please listen to these instructions carefully. When in a hospital or other healthcare facility, observe the restrictions on the use of electronic devices. Switch off before boarding an aircraft to prevent interference with communications systems. Do not operate this device in the presence of flammable gases or fumes, chemical plants, or where blasting operations are in progress. Always listen hands-free while driving a vehicle. Failure to observe these instructions may lead to immediate termination. It's time now for the show to begin. Thank you. Have a very pleasant evening.
You're not dreaming. You're listening to the Sleepless Nights podcast. I'm your host, Mr. Lobo, and this is episode 3, War of the Stars, Rebooted.
Now,
to my right is Paul. Paul, I was just about to introduce you. To my right.
All right.
Wait, who's not in outer space, is my co-host, Paul, who's right here with me at OSI Studios, right next to me to my right.
Right on those tiles on the floor.
Right on the money, right, Paul?
I'm in the office.
So tell me.
Right.
You had something to say? You were going to... something wrong with the title?
Yeah, I am kind of groaning about the title. Does everything, now... Is the point of a reboot having to tell everybody that's a reboot every damn time? I mean,
I thought that's what you had. Didn't you write down Rebooted in the notes that when we were going over before the show?
Well,
it was episode 3 Rebooted.
Well, that's a reminder to remind us that we have to reboot because of the letter. No, wait. There's another problem here.
Yes.
Well, let's put a pin in the first problem and go to the second problem.
All right. Okay.
Can we talk about the letter at all? Is this a Godzilla scenario where episode 3 only goes back to 1, and everything we did on 2 the other week just is moot?
I don't know. Did we sign an NDA? First of all, I didn't sign an NDA.
Okay.
Non-disclosure agreement for those of you not in the industry. And I guess second of all, if we do mention the letter, we would have to reintroduce it, right? If we're ignoring everything but the first episode again with this third and or second episode,
right?
But we're not doing the next one again, right? We did the next one twice. We can't do the next one 3 times,
right?
Can we?
Well, because what is it, Godzilla, where it's like Godzilla versus Mothman?
Yeah.
There's Godzilla, and then there's Godzilla versus Mothman,
which are gear. Yeah, I remember that one.
Which goes back to the first Godzilla. And then there's Godzilla versus the Great Balls of Fire, but then they don't reference Mothman ever.
No,
but it goes back to Godzilla. But it's not like Mothman doesn't exist anymore.
Basically, Godzilla is awakened. There's a Venn diagram where part of it is Godzilla in the first movie awakening from ice. And then the other circles of the Venn diagram are totally different movies that take on a wholly different direction after Godzilla awakens from that ice. He doesn't remember Mothra in the movie with Ghidorah or whatever. Unless you come all the way to
the anniversary stuff.
Yeah, or like Destroy All Monsters, where they seem to reference all of the movies all at once. Even if those characters are dead, they're somehow miraculously there.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't know. But for what we're doing,
is it spelled out in that letter? I mean, was there anything else in that letter or with any of the other papers that came with it? Is it like, did it give us any direction of like how we're supposed to tackle this?
I don't know. I've been trying to call Alan Smithy on the phone. Nobody's answering the phones over there at OSI, the space station at XEKL space station. Nobody is, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. It was so important for them to make these mandates and say, okay, we're rebooting the show. All right, only the first one counts, and you've got to start over with the second one. We redid the second one, and we used the same name, right, for the second one. Right. I guess Halloween 2 is still Halloween 2, even in Rob Zombie's Halloween 2.
Right.
But the third Halloween 2 isn't actually Halloween 2. It's Halloween Kills.
Right.
So those are two different directions. Two different directions.
Those are two different directions.
We have 2 3s. Well, there are three 2s in that case, but only 2 2s that are actually 2s, and the third 2 is its own. Okay. So what we're doing, at least with the second 2 that we did,
all right, is
that we renamed it with the same title. So the second episode was called The Next One in the original timeline.
Okay.
And in this reboot timeline, we are now, we also called it The Next One, but did we call it The Next One Rebooted? Did it go out over the air as The Next One Rebooted?
Yeah, just like the Matrix series.
I mean, they reloaded it, and then they revolved it.
And then they flushed it down the toilet with that last one.
They regurgitated it a little bit. I mean, honestly, I kind of like the last one, but that's a whole nother podcast, I guess. But then my 2 favorite of the series are probably the latest one in the Animatrix.
It's
I'm
funny.
not the one. I'm maybe not a good judge.
It's funny because it's like, I don't count the animated Star Wars stuff, but then when it comes to the Matrix, I count the animated Matrix stuff.
Only because I like it better than any of the other ones.
Even though like the video game from that series was also canon.
Yeah.
Enter the Matrix.
I never played the video game. Maybe I like the video game better than any of them. Maybe. I don't know.
But then you're like, well, Ghostbusters doesn't count as an unofficial third series. That's a video game.
I guess that's true. I guess I'm a hypocrite. At least we've settled that.
Right.
We know for sure that Mr. Lobo's a hypocrite. I think if it's something I don't really care about, then I'm willing to take anything that I like over anything else. I never was a huge Matrix fan. I only really care for the first one. I mean, I like parts of the Animatrix. I don't really like all of Animatrix, but I like parts of it. But yeah, all in all, as far as canon, I don't really care for the first one. I don't even bother with the second. I don't even think I've seen the second and third one since the theaters. I haven't even really bothered with them. The Matrix always felt like a 9 Inch Nails video and a cologne commercial had a baby. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how those movies seem to be. They're very surface. They're very. It's like your dad trying to pretend they're cool. They put on their wraparound sunglasses and their leather duster, and it's kind of embarrassing. And that's my perception of those movies.
Well, thanks for calling me out. But whatever. I will put my wraparound sunglasses and my leather duster back in the closet. My assless leather duster at that.
Assless leather duster. Oh boy.
So going back to this titling thing.
Yes. Oh yeah. Okay. So we'll leave the Matrix behind here for a second, and we'll go back to the titling thing. In the case of what we're doing versus what anybody else is doing, we've already kind of let El Gato out of the bag, right? We have
We rang the bell and found out whether or not the cat was alive or dead.
was it Schrodinger's
cat?
Cat?
Or no, Pavlov's cat.
Pavlov's cat. Schrodinger's dog.
Schrodinger's dog. Is when you throw him in a box and find out if it's hungry or not.
Yeah. Oh boy. So we've already we've at least with the second one we actually did a remake.
Right.
In our reboot, we actually did a remake of our second episode.
Right.
And kept the same titling. And so far, since we're already broadcasting and I've already had said the title, I guess this one we are basically remaking the third episode now.
Mm-hmm. So are we rebooting each individual episode? I thought we were rebooting the series as a whole, not each episode, because I think if we just put rebooted in the end of each episode, we're just redoing each episode over and over again. And as much as I'm excited about getting to episode 50 and having to redo that with an all gorilla cast, I think it will get old between episode 3 and episode 50.
I guess maybe on a case-by-case basis, we could decide whether we want to ignore all previous and go from one to whatever the next one is, or try to save some elements from the original sequel, I guess.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, I have like the next several titles here in front of me, and it's like I really don't want to do Down the Yoo-Hoo Tubes rebooted, Let's Make a Movie rebooted, Circles rebooted, and Plot Holes and Potholes rebooted. I mean, do we have to take Aaron back to? I mean, well, I guess we'd have to pick him up from the airport and take him back, whether or not he wants to go, just so we could reboot that damn episode in the same theme.
Well, the way things are going, I mean, we might end up going back to the airport.
And then have to do that for 3 more episodes afterwards.
Yeah. We did spend a lot of time driving to the airport on the show. What was the one that we went to the laundromat? Do we have to start saving up our dirty clothes to do the episode at the laundromat?
Episode 14, Laundry Day. Rebooted.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, that's something to look forward to, not look forward to.
Well, I mean, there's like Wrathacon and Recon, which was about RetroCon. Does that mean that we have to go back to RetroCon whether or not they're having it in the middle of January, February?
I guess it depends. Yeah, I guess how long it takes us to record these episodes. But yeah, more than likely.
I mean, I think it's just kind of nonsense and kind of. I think it'll get old fast. I think that instead of just rebooting each individual episode, maybe we should just only go from 1 and then 2, 3, and then 4. We'll just make our own path. I mean, if Alan Smithy or like the 20 bajillion other heads who made this decision won't answer a phone call, I guess we're up to our own to like decide this, don't you think?
Yeah, I guess if we just follow the mandate and just go forward, yeah, I suppose we can't step in the same footprints over and over again. Yeah. Even though I sort of do that in the snow so I don't fall over.
Right. We would be re-stepping in the spicy BMs over and over again.
Over and over again. Yes, my friend. Well, there you have it. We're in this episode deep. The topic is going to be Star Wars, and I guess when we come back, we're going to be looking at the Book of Boba Fett, which is a show that both Paul and I have started watching.
Oh, I have?
Yes, we talked about it in segment 5.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. I forgot. I forgot. I couldn't remember if that was rebooted or not. I couldn't remember if that was pre-reboot or post-reboot.
I suppose if this were an episode where we just assumed the second episode didn't happen again and just went off the first episode, then maybe we wouldn't remember that. But I think in this version, we would remember that. Anyhow, we're going to try to get it sorted. We have kind of like I said, a few revelations about Boba Fett. I have one particular interesting tidbit of trivia that I'd like to drop about the second episode. And we'll talk about all of that when we come back with more of The Sleepless Knights of Insomnia, Episode 3, Mach 2.
Welcome back to Bestow TV's Live-ish, and in tonight's episode, why can't I see anything?
Well, that's because we're in an ad.
An ad? Well, what should we say in said ad?
That you all should check out www.youtube.com/bestowtv to see me in new episodes of Live-ish.
While you're there, check out the classics like Creative Continuity or Mr. Lobo Does.
Yeah, do that.
We'll see you on our YouTubes at www.youtube.com/bestowtv.
Bye.
So long.
Bye.
Oh boy, Paul. Looking over this memo here, I think we've already blown it.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, well, we're supposed to ignore everything except the first episode, right? We did sort of do that. Well, of course, we have the second episode now, which I don't think we're supposed to ignore.
Right.
Because it's been redone.
Right.
But even though we're doing the third episode and kind of a remake of a third episode, which was the War of Star Wars, one of the specific mandates is we are not underlined and circled supposed to talk about Star Wars. So we've already blown it.
Yeah. Well, you know what? If they're not going to answer their phones, I highly doubt that they listen to the episode. So you know what? We just throw that spicy BM to the wind, and we just set sail. We sail away, come sail away, come sail away, come sail away with me, and we just deal with the consequences later on down the road.
All right. So when that spicy bungus hits the fan, we'll just deal with it.
When we have that spicy bungus among us, then we deal with it.
Anyhow, all right. Well, again, maybe next, and if not next episode, we'll just do a fresh reboot with the next episode.
I'm sure we will get another printout and say, hey, you know what?
Yeah.
We're going to remove that. We're going to retcon that out of there. And,
honestly, this takes all the pressure off, because if we screw up too far, we'll just reboot it all over again. We just keep rebooting it.
But I want to get to 50 and I want to go with my All-Star Gorilla cast. How are we ever going to get there if we keep rebooting?
We could just skip right to 50 when we think we're ready. We could readopt enough episodes from the old canon back in to give us the steps up to 50 if we needed to at that point.
I was just going to say we're going to really we had a reboot because of loss of fans. We're really going to find new fandom if we just go 117, 2, 3, 50, 2, 7.
It's a multiverse of madness. That's how you fix everything. It's just a multiverse.
There we go.
Okay, so speaking of Star Wars, which we were trying to and trying not. We originally were trying not to, but then failed.
Right.
Now we're trying to certainly talk about.
Here's the loophole. This is not an episode that ends in a 1.
Yeah. I don't think that matters anymore.
But if it was an episode that ends in a 1, we could not talk about Star Wars because of, tradition of that whole one episode that ends in a 1. So
yeah.
So we can talk about Star Wars, right? Even though we're mandated not to talk about Star Wars. But
see, I don't know if that really matters anymore, because first of all, number 1 doesn't end in a 1. It's just 1.
Right.
It didn't become a tradition until we did the 11th episode, which I think was not a Jurassic Park episode.
Correct.
Perhaps.
Correct. Which, now thinking back to segment 1, not a Jurassic Park rebooted might actually apply, since Jurassic Park has been rebooted.
So I kind of feel like that the whole not a thing really is not a thing until we get to 11, and we haven't got there, because in this version we're only on episode 3, and we've only had one episode that was not a Star Wars pilot, and the reason that was is because a couple of, doughy middle-aged guys who've got a microphone on the internet talk about Star Wars. So let's get to it and talk about Star Wars.
Well, then I got the answer to that.
Yeah.
How about episode 6 will be a knotted episode?
And then every episode that ends with a 6 becomes a not an episode?
Well, yeah, because if we go back with the original numbering, that would have been 21. 121.
121.
121.
Okay.
Yeah.
But are we supposed to even acknowledge the original numbering?
Well, we wouldn't be acknowledging the original numbering because it'd be episode 6, and nobody would know because it's rebooted.
But we would know.
Yeah. Well, we know it's rebooted, and everybody else is not supposed to know. So
they're not supposed to know, but we've so far titled every episode with "rebooted" in the title.
So far, all we've done is bitched about being rebooted.
I mean, isn't that the whole purpose? Is the bitching? Isn't that the new currency of the internet? Is bitching? That's why reboots exist, is so people complain, and people complain. They click on articles. They click on things that they think will justify their impotent rage. And that is what makes the world go round. That's why reboots and reimaginings exist, is to annoy people on the internet.
Well, I'm pretty annoyed.
Me too.
All so are we going to go to the choppers of Tuscan County yet?
Yeah, the Sand People of Anarchy.
Yeah.
I don't know. See, you keep saying that, and I keep saying like Dances with Banthas. That's what I'm. That's the vibe I'm getting.
The Fett Father.
See, yeah, I mean, the so far I feel like we just have a little bit of. I guess this is the story, right, of how he gets from being in the spicy bungus of the Sarlacc pit all the way up to the lofty heights of Jabba's throne. Right.
It's how he becomes Jabba the Fett.
Jabba the Fett, exactly. So, I mean, I think they're trying to have a ascension story, right? He starts from below. He literally starts from below the bottom and climbs up out of the dirt.
Right. And
then we see him all the way to where he's being showered with riches and has all these concubines and is a crime lord. So this is the tale they're telling, and I think it's interesting because they're telling half of it in flashback.
Right.
Whereas I think that they didn't think the audience would stick around if it was just a guy covered in a bald guy covered in Sarlacc stomach acids crawling around in the sand,
right,
and befriending sand people for 4 episodes before he moves on to whatever his next step in his ascension, right?
Before it becomes the Star Wars Pranos.
I think it was the thing that they wanted to say, we got to see him in the helmet right away. People have got to see if it's the Boba Fett show, it's got to, so it's an interesting, weird weird show because we're seeing, there's no suspense because there's nothing pushing the story forward because we're going sideways. We're in the present and the past at the same time. We're not the same time, but alternately. We're telling 2 stories in 2 different timelines.
Well, I was going to say, we're not even in the present because that still happens before the sequel trilogy. So,
well, that is true. I guess we're not necessarily in the present or as far as the most updated.
We're in the Mandalorian era of present, whatever that stage is
6 years after Return of the Jedi.
5-6 years. Yep.
Well, I guess probably the Jabba.
Well, the Jabba stuff does happen during Mandalorian because that happened because he has the new painted, the cleaned up armor.
Yeah. So
but
the crime
Sarlacc
lord
stuff happens probably
days after
Return
of the Jedi.
Months, years, depends. It depends how long it took him to get out of the Sarlacc.
Yeah, I guess we don't really know how long it took him to get out of it.
Right.
They make it kind of seem like he got out of it fairly quick.
It seems like that, but when you see like the wreckage and stuff, everything's kind of gone. Like everybody's gone. There's nothing there anymore. So it could have been days. I mean, I don't even think the skiff or anything's still on fire. Like it's burnt out at this time.
Yeah, the skiff blows up. So you'd think it would have been on fire if he
if
crawled
it was
out
right away, right?
Right away. So yeah, it might have taken days or weeks, even, who knows, for him to get out of there. So there's an interesting aspect to it because a lot of it is like a Western, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like Disney is really trying its damnedest to bring Westerns back in whatever way, shape, or form they will come back. The Lone Ranger movie had a very famous scene. In fact, a couple of people died making the scene where they have Johnny Depp as Lone Ranger's Indian companion or Native American companion, Tonto, on a, doing, leaping from car to car on a train, trying to take down a train, right?
Right.
They do a very similar scene, of course, in the Boba Fett show with the Sand People portraying Indians, and the train being kind of a futuristic speeder train, but they're still doing the classic sort of, what you're seeing them as bikers riding on motorcycles. I kind of see the speeder bikes as horses. Yeah.
Well, I mean, even down to the droid. And by the way, spoilers. Do we put that warning now? Is it too late to do spoilers? Can we retcon that back into the beginning of the episode?
I don't know, because I feel like by the time this episode comes out, I feel like anyone who's that hot to watch the Boba Fett series has already started.
Has already seen it. I mean, I kind of feel like, anyway, I was just saying, like, the droid, the engineer, looks like an engineer. Yeah. He's got kind of his head is sloped back and everything, so it looks like he's kind of similar to what an engineer would have looked like. Yeah,
it's definitely, they're tipping their hand quite a bit as far as the whole Western analogy. He's being accepted, Boba Fett is being accepted into the tribe. And apparently he brought his own New Zealander traditional native dance into that. That's a real thing that they were all doing. And that New Zealand tribes have very similar weapons to the
gaffy stick?
Gaffy stick, yeah. So that might have been an inspiration, perhaps, in the beginning. But so it is kind of interesting because the Sand People were always thought of as just savages and sort of treated in the classic Western sense as shoot 'em up, we attack them, they attack us, and they're just literally faceless bad guys who live out in the desert.
Right.
You
sympathize for them.
In the Mandalorian, they kind of you get a little bit of sympathy for them when Mando can communicate with them.
Right.
And then they all kind of work together to stop the dragon, the Krat dragon. And I think that was sort of, I think they kind of keep going in this same trend and again, it sort of echoes the way that Westerns went and the way that the world is kind of going, is that now we've got sort of, rather than a typical cowboys and Indians situation where this is an enemy that we don't have to feel bad about slaughtering. We now have some actual perspective, a little more perspective, since we're living with them, with the Boba Fett. We have some more perspective on them and their point of view.
Right. And then the other aspect is they're kind of turning it around on Boba Fett, where he was a despicable bounty hunter, and he's kind of seems to have a little bit more morals when it's around these guys, and probably is going to develop of how he's going to be as a crime lord. Yeah, I guess going to be a little bit more honorable.
I guess all of this has taught him something, we're assuming, because we're not getting any bounty hunter business from this show at all.
Right.
Which is interesting, because you would think if it was if someone said, hey, there's going to be a show about Boba Fett, you would think it would be him chasing his marks across the galaxy and bringing him him back alive, right? But I think just because The Mandalorian did that so well, and I think originally The Mandalorian was created from an unused Boba Fett script.
Right, because up till when Mandalorian came out, it was always going to be a Boba Fett movie, and then it was going to be a Boba Fett series, Boba Fett, and then all of a sudden it was like, nah, we're going to make the Mandalorian, and then eventually Boba Fett sprung out of the Mandalorian.
I kind of feel
much other things, Ahsoka and everything else, kind of spurred out of that series.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like they were trying to handicap them on purpose. It's like, you can't use this, you can't use that, you can't use any of the legacy characters. You know, and you can't be Boba Fett. We can't have Boba Fett in there. And then by the end of the series, you know, we've got Luke Skywalker in there, and we've got Boba Fett in there,
and Ahsoka Tano.
Yeah, and so you know, they started that series. You know, I felt like that they what was interesting is they took everything away from them because I think they were afraid that they were going to outshine the feature films, but they ended up outshining the feature films anyway with none of that.
Right.
And so it ended up becoming their star project, which I think probably ruffled a lot of feathers at Lucasfilm. And I feel like, you know, with the Book of Boba Fett, I think it's the sort of a corporate sort of attempt here to and this is, again, I don't know what's going on at Lucasfilm. I don't have any insider information, but my impression is that it's like, okay, all right, well, you did a great job doing that, but now we're going to do it, you know, with the actual legacy character, and it's going to be an even more bigger, more epic thing, you know, that's going to, and so, you know, so they're telling this tale, but what the interesting thing is that just like, and we mentioned this in the segment 5, just like you can't really a RoboCop. A Judge Dredd movie is always going to live in the shadow of RoboCop. A Starship Troopers movie is always going to live in the shadow of Aliens, even though they're not, even though they came first. A Boba Fett TV series is going to live in the shadow of The Mandalorian.
Right.
And that's a real problem they have to deal with. And we are going to be back with more mysterious helmeted action when we come back with more Sleepless Nights podcast.
Boba Fett versus the Mothman. Got it.
Attention, people of Earth! Attention, people of Earth!
The following message was transmitted to Earth via Cosmic Spool. Our award-winning web series, Mr. Lobo Does, is here on Blu-ray and other forms of physical media. Today is your last chance to accept our offer. Fly over to osi74.square.site or through this direct redirect link, www.bestow.tv/MLDS1. That's www.bestow.tv/MLDS1. There you can place your order and secure your copy of the Mr. Lobo Does Blu-ray or 2-volume DVD set. Earthlings, you have less than 24 hours to comply. And just to show we are serious, we will now destroy another neighboring planet that did not meet our demands.
Release the death ray!
Mandalorian was a huge, huge hit, enormous hit, and the sequel trilogy was not, I would say at best, uneven reaction from fans, and a lot of infighting behind the scenes with the later feature films. And when they released Force Awakens on Blu-ray, they put the Mando's ship in Maz Kanata's bar or hideaway or whatever you want to call that place. And without telling the creators of The Mandalorian.
Right.
And then in response, The Mandalorian blew up the Razor Crest. Right. Well, I feel like that came at the same exact time where it appears in in A Force Awakens and then it blows up in the show.
I mean, there's two fields of thought of that on my end.
Okay.
The first field of thought is that it might have happened unbeknownst to the creators.
Yeah, they didn't ask them first.
They didn't ask them, or
in either case, they didn't include them in the process.
Because, like in the prequels and stuff like that, like generally speaking, like the special effects department works separate from everybody else. They're kind of doing their own thing, and and you look back in the history of that stuff, and how many times did they slip in like the potato in the asteroid belt, or there's a TIE fighter scene happening inside on the sides of one of the buildings in the prequels, or there's the Enterprise hidden somewhere, or even in like Star Trek, there's a Millennium Falcon hidden somewhere. You know that they kind of slip that kind of stuff in as winks and nods.
In Close Encounters, there's an R2D2 on the mothership.
There's an R2D2 in C-3PO in the inscription of Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark. So I mean, they kind of do that stuff. But
it just could be an internal nod that was badly timed because that ship was destined to be blown up anyway.
Right. So I mean, is it that aspect, or because we're in a different era where that thing doesn't that kind of stuff doesn't happen anymore? Like they don't really slip that kind of stuff. I mean, I kind of feel like they still kind of slip that stuff because remember there was when what was it? Endgame, Infinity War Endgame came out, and there was a mandate, and they were like, absolutely do not put Howard the Duck in any of the scenes. And you watch the end credits, and who's in one of the scenes? Howard the Duck.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess there's still not really much control because they're like, how many effects are going on in that scene alone to look for one Howard the Duck.
Yeah, I either they didn't get the memo or
they're like screw it,
or it's a screw it. Yeah, and I think that in the case of Star Wars, and maybe I'm just perceiving this, but with Kathleen Kennedy and all the different directors getting hired and fired and all the different kind of changes of power over there, it does and changing directors in the case of it seemed like. The three sequel trilogy movies that we got play okay by themselves.
Right.
But they don't really work together as a story if you try to watch them front to back. And because each person undid what the person previous.
Each one backed down from whatever negative fan reaction instead of just pushing forward and doing what they had to do.
But I think some of it was just a pissing contest too, where they just were trying to, they didn't want to have to listen to somebody else's direction on something because it was what they would have done.
Right. It's funny that you bring up pissing contest, and this ties back to the Matrix.
Yeah.
And I watched the Matrix, and I'm not as big of a fan of the reboot as you were. There was just a lot of stuff, just drug and oh my god. And I'm a fan of Matrix because I'm a fan of action, and that film had very little of it. But after watching that, I always do the thing that I always do is go on to YouTube and then try to intake all different reviewers, Red Letter Media and whatnot, and I try to do it afterwards so I don't spoil anything.
Yeah. And
the Red Letter, I believe it was Red Letter Media that actually had the interesting aspect of how the Matrix works, like what the backstory, what the storyline is, and if you go into it watching it as Lana Wachowski going, fuck you to Warner Brothers, the actual movie makes a lot more sense, and I kind of get it, where it's like, because there's a lot of things that they say in the movie where it's like, Warner Brothers is gonna remake this movie with or without you. Yeah. And this film kind of plays out with, well, if they're gonna make it with or without me and I'm here, well, I might as well just burn it down myself and just do my own thing. And that's kind of like an FU letter to like just studio execs everywhere.
I mean, that seemed obvious to me when I watched it, is that it definitely commented on the whole purpose or reason or reasoning of rebooting, and the argument is always, who's the author? Is the studio the author? Right. Is the creator the author?
Because as far as the Wachowskis were concerned, they were done after that trilogy. I mean, that trilogy was supposed to originally be 9 movies, and they had to condense like scripts from 9 movies into 3 movies and a video game and an animated series. Yeah. And as far as they were concerned, that series was over.
Yeah.
But it was always, and then you always heard, like, if you listen to like different news outlets, oh, well, the Warner Bros. Is going to remake it. Oh, Warner Bros. Is going to do a Morpheus prequel. Oh, Warner Bros. Is going to do this. Warner Bros. Is going to do this. Oh, it's with the Wachowskis. Oh, it's without the Wachowskis. And so it was just, I didn't really pick up on it until afterwards, and then I was reflecting on it, and it's like, where like Neo is kind of the swap for the Wachowskis and how they kind of felt. How they're trapped by this, and that they're going to reboot the Matrix whether you're involved or not. So you might as well just take care of it yourself and burn it to the ground.
Yeah, well, and I thought some of those action sequences were pretty great when they were like using when they were activating the whole city and they were using people as human bombs and stuff like that. I thought that stuff was pretty cool.
Right. Spoilers, but okay.
Whatever. I mean, I feel like that's
spoilers
so vague.
to the listeners.
I mean, I feel like that's so vague. It's
it might actually be in the trailers.
But I feel like the whole thing seemed very self-aware, which I really liked. I know we sidestepped into the Matrix town, but I think being self-aware and to where you're making it clear to your audience that you're not going into it lightly, that you've thought about all of the problems that are potentially there.
Right.
We're getting an earful of the kind of notes that the movie's probably getting, that the game is getting in the movie, in the game within the movie, within the game within the movie within the game.
The game within the movie, but still looks like the movie.
Yeah,
within the game.
Within the game. So,
are you sure Alan and Smithy isn't like working with Warner Brothers on this shit? I think the studio heads were from Warner Brothers to Sleepless Nights.
Yeah, perhaps. But what's interesting about that is again it's their story to tell,
right? And
unfortunately, when you make these deals with people, that intellectual property is not yours anymore. Right.
Right.
And
look at the Halloween series and John Carpenter.
So John Carpenter. I know if John Carpenter had his druthers, they wouldn't have even made Halloween 2.
Right.
And he didn't even direct the second Halloween movie, if I'm not mistaken.
I think he was just on for a producer, and I think he might have wrote.
He may have wrote and he may have produced, but he was not in the director's chair for the second one or any of the ones afterwards, because the very first one is John Carpenter's Halloween, and he told that story. But again, when you make something in this industry and it's successful, and that success, they want to template that success. When something works, they want to go, well, how many times will it work? Will it work 3 times? Will it work 5 times? And, will this thing that's, maybe even a third as successful as the original be a more worthwhile project than a brand new subject matter, which might not do anything,
Right.
So as Hollywood gets more and more scared, they want to take fewer and fewer risks, and they're going to go back to every single thing that made them $1 and literally grind it into the ground.
Right.
And so if
which is so funny, because half the time they don't even want to back the goddamn project to begin with, and they're so hesitant, and they want to cut every corner, and they want to cut their budget, and then it's successful, and then they want to repeat it.
Yes, that's the funny thing, is you have people begging to get their series or their franchise reinvigorated, or and it maybe takes them 12 years to finally get the thing, or 20 years to finally get the thing going again, and then they go crazy. Oh, okay, well, we're going to do 25 movies now, and every character is going to have their own movie, and we're going to have a TV series and a cartoon and a breakfast cereal. So it's always seems like that there's a very and Disney's been through this the first time, a few times, where it's like when they first announced the Star Wars stuff, they were trying to do 2 movies a year, and 5 TV series or some ridiculous thing.
Alternating saga movies every other year with the Star Wars stories stuff, those opposing years.
Yeah, and
you know,
it was confusing to the audience, and again, one misstep and
one misstep and you saw what happened.
yeah, you stumble, and again, they're trying to bank on what's going to be they think that the legacy, I mean, not the legacy, but they think that the sequel trilogy, like the numbered movies, those were going to be the ones
Right.
that were going to be the huge ones. But honestly, it's really interesting because the Star Wars story side movies are the things that kind of were their undoing in two different ways. Rogue One was such a success that it overshadowed what they were doing or their primary project.
Right.
And on the other hand is that Solo took the fall for a lot of people's disappointment with Last Jedi.
Right.
So
Solo was twofold. Solo was the loss of faith with the directors and them canning the directors and replacing it with Ron Howard, and the failure of.
So it was extra expensive for them to make, and it was the lowest performing.
Although I kind of want to know. I want to know what the Lord and Miller version was. Can we have the Lord and Miller cut of Solo?
Yeah, but they have to do it in Legos.
I'm for it. I mean, they already do the Lego stuff on Disney Plus. Go for it.
Yeah, just go for it. It would be great, right? I mean, all that Lego stuff is great because I feel like that irreverent sensibility works with the Lego stuff.
Right.
I don't know if I'd want a regular Star Wars movie to have that same snark. But anyhow, that being said, they ended up having a very uneven series of films. And meanwhile, quietly, The Mandalorian came in and just kicked 9,000 kinds of ass. Mm-hmm.
On a platform that was experimental, and they had no idea whether it was going to work or not.
And for whatever reason, they couldn't get their Obi-Wan Kenobi series ever going, or the Obi-Wan Kenobi movie going. They couldn't get the Boba Fett movie going, or the Boba Fett series going. Mm-hmm. They couldn't get anything going, and then they give this series to Dave Filoni and
Iron Man.
Yes, Favreau, John
Favreau. Yeah,
they give the series to them with a lot of limitations. Almost impossible limitations, and they come off with something that audiences and Star Wars fans really loved, and then they folded Boba Fett back into that, and we finally get. I mean, Boba Fett gets the most good Boba Fett business that he's ever had in The Mandalorian. Because I can't even say we've mentioned it on the podcast before, but Boba Fett was the greatest lie of my generation.
Right.
He was a cartoon in the holiday special, which we did mention last week.
Mm-hmm. Whether or not we can count it, but yeah, go on.
He was you sent in your 8 proof of purchase seals for that action figure that was supposed to be featured in Empire Strikes Back that you knew nothing about. And he literally does a few silent nods, and he delivers Han Solo to Jabba the Hutt. Doesn't really do a whole lot in that movie. And then you're waiting for the third movie, and he just is unceremoniously dropped into the Sarlacc pit and eaten
by a blind Han Solo.
Yeah, Han Solo doesn't even know he defeated Boba Fett. He just accidentally bumps into him and hits him with a gaffy stick or whatever that was, a vibro axe, right? Hits him with
spear.
A vibro axe or spear, and knocks him into accidentally with the butt end of it, accidentally bumps into him and knocks him into the
sets
Sarlacc
off his jetpack.
Yeah, sets off his jetpack, but he ultimately crashes into the Sarlacc pit, which they're all there to be fed to. And that's it. And that's it for so. But the thing is that we saw the Star Wars Holiday Special in '79, and we waited a whole year to see what Boba Fett was going to be about, and then he didn't do anything. Mm-hmm. And then we waited 3 more years to see how he was going to be in the climax of Return of the Jedi, and then he also didn't do anything.
Right.
And then in The Mandalorian, he shows up vindicated. He's had this whole experience after escaping the Sarlacc pit, and is this very layered, deep, badass character that we never ever got to see him be, and it caused such a splash that they immediately announced a TV series, which is what we're talking about today, and we will talk about more in detail with the Book of Boba Fett. They did that little bumper. I have to say before we go out, it's really weird that they did that little teaser where they knock out Bib Fortuna. Mm-hmm. And he takes over the throne. I guess we're to assume that Bib Fortuna took the throne after Jabba died, which I have a hard time believing anyway.
Right.
But
I just assume maybe because he's second in command, maybe he has access to all the different outlets and stuff. And not to mention that like most of the team was already killed by Luke and Han and Leia. So there might not have been too terribly much left, and he had access to the palace. He probably never even left the palace during all that when all that shit happened, and then he just locked the palace down.
Yeah, it's probably true. And he had seniority, and he certainly had Jabba's ear, so he knew everything Jabba knew.
He had access to other bounty hunters and whatnot, I'm assuming.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess it's believable.
The fortunes.
He was living large, whatever
definitely
the case
large.
So Boba Fett comes in there and for whatever reason, and I still don't really understand why. I guess he feels that Jabba owes him in some way. He decides that he's going to rule from Jabba's palace and be the new crime lord of Tatooine. And so we see that in a little teaser for something called the Book of Boba Fett. And honestly, I feel like they just filmed that. Looked like a Saturday Night Live sketch. Like, I don't know, like if they had anything written for the show when they did that happen. It almost seems like, hey guys, what if Boba Fett goes back to Jabba's palace and takes Jabba's throne? It's like, yes. And then they just filmed that. And that was just like a teaser. But now I feel like they have to hang the whole series on this premise of him being this crime boss. Anyhow, we'll talk about that when we come back with more of our war on Star Wars.
This space for rent. This signal space to your ears for rent. This space between your ears for rent.
Do you have a product, service, website, company? Propose, perhaps? No, we don't want to do that, right?
If you can't propose?
Well, I mean, if you really wanted to propose...
It would be encased forever.
Johnny says, will you marry me, Susie? We could do that, sure.
Why not? Sure.
Not? If you have a product or service or whatever to promote, people, especially that you want to promote to our listeners, why not become a sponsor?
A sponsor, you say?
Yeah, a sponsor of this program. Contact Mr. Lobo at his personal email. I'm giving this out right now just for you. Okay, right. Don't tell anyone. All right?
Whisper it.
Mr. Lobo, that's MRLOBO, at cinemaInsomnia.com. CINEMAINSOMNIA.com.
That sounds so sexy.
Yes. Mr. Lobo at cinemaInsomnia.com. Contact me and we will get you on the air. We will talk about your stuff.
We're back with the Sleepless Nights podcast, and I loved Boba Fett as a kid. I sent in my 8 proof of purchase seals to Kenner and got that action figure, and there was that mystique because he had that missile on his backpack that did not fire out.
Right.
But it looked like it should.
You still have yours?
And yeah, I do.
I had mine too. I still have mine.
And there was somewhere. And the reason the reason the missile did not fire is because the Battlestar Galactica toy that had come out in '79 had they had a Colonial Viper and a Cylon Interceptor that fired these little red missiles, and a kid choked on one and died. And so there was a panic there, and there was a good, I would say, 5 to 8 year spread where no toys fired any missiles of any kind. Or if they did, they were gigantic. Like if you look at the toys like in G.I. Joe or Mask, if they fired a missile, it had all these fins and projectiles, and they were fat or brightly colored, and tiny missile. They didn't shoot little tiny missiles. They shoot
some of the later stuff. later stuff, the missiles are like super long, so they couldn't be swallowed. So like if you had Boba Fett with a rocket firing missile, the missile would go into his backpack, but then he'd have this like long stem that would come out of the bottom of his backpack because it was so freaking long.
So anyhow, this was a toy, but when we were kids, we didn't know all that. We just saw that the missile was welded in place on the figure. We're like, oh crap. This toy killed a kid. So it had that mystique on top of that. This guy
Boba Fett is really a badass. He killed a kid in real life.
He really killed a kid. So we had this mystique. And again, in the holiday special, I know people like to mock the holiday special, but that's a great entrance for him. It's like they have this whole adventure. They think he's a friend. He double crosses them, and then as he's backing out slowly out of the Millennium Falcon, it's like, we'll meet again, Skywalker. And he hits the button, and his backpack launches him out of the hatch of the Millennium Falcon, and the smoke spirals up into the sky. And we don't know when we're going to see that guy again, but we know he's going to be trouble from now on.
Well, I can say that we watched the Care Bear movie because that was the same art studio, and he does not show up in the Care Bear movie at all.
Nelvana made the animation there, and Nelvana did the Droids cartoon, and Boba Fett did appear in several episodes of the Droids Saturday morning cartoon.
Actually,
as a bounty hunter.
They're doing a 50th anniversary Lucasfilm. They've been re-releasing a lot of the toys in the 6-inch line, and there's a Boba Fett Target exclusive. I have it on my wish list. I am drooling all over it. It comes out next month. It's in an enclosed box that has the actual original Droids artwork. It has Boba Fett on it, and then the box opens, and he's in that Droids. He's molded in that Droid style.
And with the colors from the
colors and everything, yes. And I'm excited. I want it because it's like I have a lot of Boba Fett's around this space pod. I mean, around this room, and it's just a lot of green and gray, and then you got this thing that's like kind of blue, and he looks different. His face is like a little bit longer. I mean, I guess you get that with the Mando too, but it's fun that we have a Boba Fett that's different looking,
different
he stands
looking.
out.
And there also, I wanted to mention there was an Empire Strikes Back sketchbook which explained the Mandalorians and that they were originally enemies of the Jedi.
Right.
And that they were going to be brought in against Luke Skywalker, and that was going to be part of what the latter movies were going to be about. And they had, several different sketches of Mandalorian, what they called the Mandalorian Super Commandos is what they called them in the sketchbook. And they were varying variations on Boba Fett's design. And so that was the other exciting thing that was sort of dropped in the Empire Strikes Back sketchbook that, again, added to the mystique.
Did you see? Oh, go ahead, finish.
Oh, I was going to say you read the novels, which I did not.
Yeah.
But I was just going to share that in the Marvel comics, which I read, ferociously, the Star Wars Marvel comic would fill in the gaps between the movies with more stories.
Right.
And they had a deal with Lucasfilm is that they could use any of the legacy characters they wanted to, as long as they placed them in the proximity of wherever they were when the story ended in the movie. So they brought back Boba Fett. Boba Fett was when the Sarlacc pit burps, he's regurgitated from the Sarlacc pit. He's literally barfed out. So right after the Sarlacc pit burps, because he's covered in metal or whatever, the Sarlacc does not agree. It doesn't agree. Boba Fett does not agree with with the Sarlacc pit. Barfs him out. And then he's just covered in Sarlacc barf in the sand. And then he's found by Jawas who think he's a droid. And they try to clean him up and sell him. But he has amnesia. And at the same time, Han Solo...
Sounds like the book of Boba Fett so far.
And he sounds like... And what's funny is at the same time, Han Solo is on Tatooine trying to get his bank accounts unfrozen because they think he's inactive, because he's been in carbonite for so many years. So he's trying to get his money out of the bank and I'm alive. I'm not frozen. But my bank account's frozen. So anyhow, so he has a little altercation with. It's funny because when the last time they met, Han Solo was blind, and then the second time they meet, Boba Fett has amnesia. So they just sort of just miss each other. They have this weird misadventure, and then the Sarlacc and then the sand crawler with Boba Fett on it crashes into the Sarlacc pit, and goes down the sand crawler goes down the Sarlacc pit and explodes. And that's where that episode ends, with putting him back in the Sarlacc pit. Anyway, I thought I would just share that.
Yeah, I mean, there was a resurgence in the '90s where the novels came out. You know, Timothy Zahn wrote his trilogy of novels, and what created that resurgence of Star Wars in the '90s, because there was no more movies, and what started the rumors of, is he going to make those sequels? You know, is he going to finally make, you know, the next three in the series? And there's those books and comic books and everything else during that era is filled out a lot of Boba Fett's badassery, because again, you if you take Boba Fett for what he's worth in the films, he's just a guy that says 3 words and then dies unceremoniously. I have a feeling that that Star Wars has this thing where it's like, oh, we're going to introduce these characters and make them badass. Let's create a character called Phasma and make her badass and put her silver armor and then just kill her unceremoniously like several times across those series. They have this bad habit of doing that. But those books,
all flash and then nothing.
Right?
All sound and fury signifying nothing.
I think her downfall is when Han's like, "Whoa, does this planet have a trash compactor?" It's like, you know, all right. Once you kind of do that with your badass character, it kind of takes that gloss off of that silver armor. Yeah. But the books filled in a lot of the bounty hunting, and of course, you know, when George Lucas did the sanctioned, was it Shadows of the Empire, that series that happens in between, that bridges the gap between Empire and Jedi. And all that stuff had like Boba Fett content. I mean, all that stuff like really built that mystique of Boba Fett. But there's a book series called, well, it wasn't even a book series. It's just a single book. It was called Tales from Jabba's Palace, which was...
Oh, I think I saw the cover of that. Yep.
Yeah,
okay.
They're all short stories. There was a series of them. They were always Tales of. So there was like Tales of the Cantina, Tales of Boba Fett's Palace, and I think there was a third book in the series.
Jabba, you said Boba Fett's Palace.
Yeah, well, they were forward thinking. Yeah, but
yes,
Tales from...
Wow, that's really calling it early.
Tales of Jabba's Palace, and they were just short stories. They were the thing that I was into then, but complain about now, where it's like everything has to be connected. Well, every character in Jabba's palace had an ulterior motive, and all their stories interlocked. So these were all short stories, but they all interlocked. And Mara Jade, who becomes Luke Skywalker's wife in that series, she was in Jabba's palace. She tries to assassinate him and fails within her story, but. Boba's story is actually his escape from the Sarlacc pit, and I'm actually surprised that that's very close to what they show. I mean, granted, they didn't show much of him escaping the Sarlacc pit, but it's pretty darn close.
I thought they did it pretty well, because it kind of echoes what I imagined based on the Marvel comics. Like I said, it echoes a little bit what you imagined. I guess what's the person who's the comedian? Patton Oswalt did a whole bit about Boba Fett escaping from the Sarlacc pit, and it's beat for beat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What they ended up doing.
I think the only thing that they didn't do is I think he ends up summoning, like his ship is in orbit in space, and I believe he summons the ship and crashes the ship into the Sarlacc, and that's what aids his escape. So that's like the only thing that was kind of missing. I believe that's how that was one of the things that goes, because in the book series moving forward, his next ship is the Slave 2.
Oh, okay. That's really interesting. And what's interesting with they had all these books. They had all the Dark Horse books, the Marvel books, the comics, the paperbacks, and then Disney comes along, buys the series. They want to start making movies, and then they make this like a mandate that all of that stuff is completely irrelevant,
right in the
not
trash
canon.
it goes.
Right in the Sarlacc pit it goes. The trash compactor. Yes, it goes into the trash compactor. And so that was very frustrating, I think, because, you know, when you're a fan and you spend your money and and they tell you a story, you take it on good faith that, you know, it matters. It's part of this thing that you like, you know, and that this is an actual story of these actual characters that are in these movies, or possibly, you know, at least possibly.
Right.
And to have someone come along and say, oh, yeah, all that stuff you read, yeah, that's bullshit. We've got a better story for you. We're going to tell you how this thing goes from now on. And it's like, well, it's like, okay, you took my money. You paid someone else to write a story with your characters, and now none of that matters. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that kind of burns a little bit. And so we're like, okay, well, I guess we're not, and there was probably a thought that are we ever going to see Boba Fett again, I mean,
they label all those books. Those books count, but they're called legacy. That's to kind of, kiss up to the fans. Well, they're called legacy. They're kind of like what if stories. They don't count. They don't count to the overall canon because at that time they used to be canon. George Lucas and Lucasfilms used to say anything that was from that came out in the 90s or whatever was approved by him and supposedly read by him, but never was.
Probably not. Yeah.
But all that stuff was canon. And then later on, it's like all that stuff, including because later on you get the prequel books and stuff, and all that stuff was canon and explored the Jedi, the Jedi Council and all their adventures and everything. And then it's like all that stuff is gone. All of it is gone. It doesn't count. It's legacy.
So it made it even more, I think, special when Boba Fett just shows up and just kicks ass in The Mandalorian. Right. And he kind of we just see a lot of sides to him, and he's unhelmeted. We see him fighting with the sand person stick, with the gaffy stick.
Gaffy stick, yep.
And
later on get to see him earn that gaffy stick, which was totally awesome.
Yeah, that was totally awesome. And I think that what's interesting, too, is that, we see him, there's a change in him from everything that's happened. And he's a somewhat more driven and less dubious character. And so all of that has been, really fantastic and interesting. And it was also kind of cool in the recovery of his armor too. That story of his armor being recovered.
When Cobb Vanish, I think it's Cobb Vanish. I know his first name is Cobb.
I don't know.
His armor. He
Cowboy Cobb or
Cowboy
whatever
Cobb.
the hell.
Cowboy Cobbus.
But yeah, I mean, man, again, a lot of Western analogies, of course. Mm-hmm. And, we talked a little bit about how the Sand People are kind of just an inkling of them being more sympathetic in The Mandalorian, where we sort of understand them more.
Hell because, yeah. I mean, you kind of got the train and everything coming through, and they're just like needlessly killing them for no true really reason. That train is going through their land. That train had, the people that are whoever commissioned that or did that had no right really being on their land, and they just go through and kill them because they're savages or whatever. And
that's a real thing. I mean, that's a real thing.
That's a parallel.
That's a parallel to something that really happened in the New World, in the Old West, where people would just take shots at native tribes because they were I don't know, manifest destiny, right? We're just going to clear them out and scare them away, and we're going to take over their land, and it's ours now. And they're not like us anyway.
Right.
They don't love
savages.
They're savages. They don't love their children like we do, and all that. And so it is kind of interesting with the Book of Boba Fett, because we've got so far two parallel storylines where we're seeing his rise, where he befriends the Sand People. Really, he's a slave to them at first.
Right.
And it's a very slow process of him earning their respect, learning how to fight. But then he has
to, after he kills the Kraken, the Sand Kraken, the sand in my Kraken, he earns their respect.
Do those weird watermelons come from him? Is that monster produce those somehow? Are those his babies?
I don't know. I was trying to figure out the logic of that, because it's like, what if those exist? Then why did they do moisture? Why is there moisture farming and stuff?
I mean, maybe they're literally farming them.
Maybe, I guess. But I find it interesting is when that episode dropped, Star Wars actually had the picture of the Kraken from Clash on Titans. So I'm assuming that was actually supposed to be a direct reference to that character.
Yeah, I mean, it does look a lot like the Kraken. If you now that you explain that with the 4 arms, that is a lot like the Kraken from Clash of the Titans.
So I guess it's the Star Wars. Like I said, Sand in my Kraken.
Oh boy! But they've got these black melons that produce water. Are they eggs? I'm not sure what they are. They're balls that they're underground that had to be dug out that have water in them, trapped in them somehow.
Right.
I don't know if they're produced by that monster that they had to fight or not. But that's just one in a many series of
maybe they're spicy BMs.
Oh no! A series of trials. Oh boy. A series of trials, and then the interesting, I think the interesting thing is, going with the Native American parallel again, that dances with Bantha's parallel again, is that he earns their respect. He ends up getting sort of bandaged up. Not really bandaged up, but he ends up getting a similar costume
garb. Yeah,
garb that they have.
Explains away the robes that he was wearing in The Mandalorian.
Yeah,
it's not that he just killed. I guess we kind of assume that he killed Tuskens and just took their gaffy stick and their robes, and he was just wearing their stuff because he needed to survive after escaping the Sarlacc. And this actually gives you a little bit more information on that, and it's a little less savage as what you may have been making up.
Yeah, he realized that he earned all of that, and there's a really bizarre, and I won't say how it happens because it's quite a surprise. But he goes on like a very typical Native American style vision quest, and in this vision quest that he's having, this sort of waking dream that he's experiencing, he is kind of reliving, tussling with the tentacles of the Sarlacc as a parallel of being in this mighty tree,
right?
And fighting the branches of that tree. And when he comes out of this vision quest, he is still holding a branch,
right,
miraculously from his dream, and which is interesting because it kind of brings the spiritual back into it, because Star Wars kind of has a weird mystical aspect to it that is largely ignored by The Mandalorian. And this is a straight mystical thing that happens where he pulls a piece of wood from a dream, and then they forge it into his gaffy stick. That was pretty amazing to me. I was pretty overcome by that. I thought it was very creative and interesting. It's weird because it's like that kind of thing can be somewhat annoying too, because it's like, because we had to explain how they got wood on a planet that doesn't have any trees to make these things in the first place. I always assumed that they were, the ones in the ones that are props are made of wood, but I always assumed that they made the gaffy sticks out of bantha tusks.
Yeah,
that was my assumption.
Boner. Yeah. Excuse me.
Or this was some weapon that they had stolen or raided from from a box of weapons from some other planet or whatever.
Right.
I didn't really feel like,
because they have rifles and everything too. They have rifles, they have goggles, they have tech. It's just not their tech.
And the rifles, have wooden stocks on them and stuff, so I didn't really think, how did they get wood on the desert planet? That was not a thing that I really felt needed to be explained. So from on that side, I feel like, do we really need this explained? If someone told me about it, I'd be like, really? Do we really need this explained? But in watching it and experiencing it, it felt very cool, and I liked having this aspect of the Sand People of being kind of having a spiritual side to them.
Right.
Anyway. Very cool. We don't want to, obviously, the Mandalorian continues. We don't want to go too deep into it. We don't want to spoil it for you, the series for you. But we'll all be watching it, and I'm sure when it's all over, we'll talk about it again.
Yeah, maybe we'll watch the entire series, and maybe we'll do a yesa. Maybe this will be the first time of us ever doing a yesa, right?
Yeah, I guess it would be the official first time.
Official.
I think.
All right. So So we just talked about like Disney and their legacy stuff. Do you think that maybe we can contact Alan Smithy and just have him look over the old stuff and be like, you know what? How about like the old Sleepless Night stuff will just be legacy stuff all the way up until we reboot the series. So it's still there. It just doesn't count, so
Legacy isn't. I mean, Legacy's okay, but I think I don't know. Of course, like Star Trek has the Kelvin timeline.
Yeah, there was the Kelvin timeline, which deviated from the regular timeline.
I mean, this is kind of I feel like this is like this whole thing just feels like a wedgie. I feel like it could be like the Melvin timeline.
Yeah, they certainly Melvined us.
So maybe we could get. I don't know. We could give the audience a Melvin timeline. I don't know, but I don't know. We definitely have what this is. We're now in the reboot timeline, and I think I'm getting a message from Alan Smithy, and I think I better take this. He's not happy. He is. Yeah. I could feel the text shouting. That's how much trouble
is written in caps.
Yeah.
Underlined and circled somehow.
Yeah, I don't know how you circle a text, but they somehow did it. I don't know. He's got a better phone than I do.
Here, give me the phone.
You have been listening to the Sleepless Nights podcast, or should we say pODDcast.
pODDcast.
Emphasis on the odd. Our theme is by Mars Homeworld at Deadhouse Music. Our opening announcement is by Ophelia Necro. She does a radio show called Suicide Watch. And you could reach Mr. Lobo at cinemainsomnia.com or find me on YouTube, YouTube/Mr. Lobo, MISTERLOBO. Mr. Lobo on Facebook, Facebook/mr.lobo, or on Twitter at Mr. Lobo, MISTERLOBO.
Or you can find myself, Paul Sanders, or better known as Bestow TV, at bestow.tv, on YouTube /Bestow TV, on Twitter at Bestow Prod, PROD, and on Facebook, Bestow TV.
If you want to place an advertisement with this podcast, and gosh, why wouldn't you? We could be talking about you right now. Contact us, Mr. Lobo at cinemainsomnia.com. That's MRLOBO @CINEMAINSOMNIA.com. Or support us on Patreon. Patreon supporters get to hear this podcast before anyone else and a lot of other great stuff, right, Paul?
Sure.
Doesn't get it better than that, right? So come join the fun at
patreon.com/Sleepless Nights Podcast.
That's
patreon.com/Sleepless Nights Podcast.
Please stay up with us next week for another Sleepless Nights podcast. Or should we say, pODDcast.
pODDcast.
The best thing about being an insomniac is never having to say goodnight.
Good night.